Seattle's skyline is defined by its glass peaks. Penthouse living up here offers a very specific psychological appeal, complete separation from the noise, from the traffic, and the unpredictable streets below. To achieve total isolation, skyscrapers rely on three defensive layers. First, the transit infrastructure, private elevators controlling access. Second, the exterior perimeter, sheer glass walls stopping the elements. Finally, the inner sanctum, the penthouse itself. Access is strictly governed by technology, but this sense of security relies entirely on these systems functioning exactly as they were programmed. When the infrastructure designed to protect you begins to act on its own, those layers of isolation start to feel very different. Consider Mathan. He worked overnight security at a high-end luxury condominium overlooking Puget Sound. The building capped out at exactly 47 floors. Curious tone. At 2:18 a.m., the building's primary artery, the penthouse elevator, called itself. The display ticked upward, 46, 47, and then it stopped at a destination that didn't exist, floor 48. The security cameras showed an empty cabin. It sat up there in the dark shaft for almost 3 minutes before the motor engaged again, lowering back down to the marble lobby. When the doors finally chimed and slid open, rainwater pooled on the floor. A trail of small, wet, bare footprints led directly out of the empty cabin, stopping abruptly halfway across the lobby. Building technicians checked the system the next morning. They insisted the software had absolutely no programming for a 48th floor, yet the dot matrix maintenance log recorded a clear mechanical action, a deliberate trip to an impossible destination with an empty cabin. If the building's own central nervous system can physically travel to unmapped spaces above the penthouse, the residents relying on those very same elevators are never completely insulated. The second layer of defense is the exterior boundary. In modern skyscrapers, that usually means a sheer wall of floor-to-ceiling glass. The immense altitude is supposed to guarantee that absolutely nothing can reach you from the outside. Olivia rented the upper floor of one of these downtown penthouses. During a heavy rainstorm around 1 a.m., she was sitting quietly near her windows, reading. The silence was broken by 3 deliberate, slow taps against the glass. The sound came from the outside. 44 stories up, with a sheer drop to the street, and no balconies or maintenance ledges anywhere nearby. She walked over and pressed her flashlight against the pane. She saw nothing but rain. But as she stood perfectly still, her dark reflection in the glass raised a hand and slowly waved back at her. Olivia fled into the hallway. When building security swept the exterior with floodlights the next morning, they found 3 distinct handprints pressed onto the outside of her window. We look at height as a natural defense, but when physical handprints appear on the exterior of a glass wall 44 stories above the pavement, the logic of the building and the safety of the perimeter completely collapses. That leaves the innermost sanctum, the penthouse itself, and the private spaces situated at the absolute peak of the architecture. Daniel, a high-end real estate photographer, was hired to document a vacant, multi-million-dollar penthouse whose owner had moved overseas. He spent the afternoon moving through the empty, silent rooms with his camera. To photograph the private rooftop terrace, he had to climb a narrow emergency stairwell. As he walked up, he heard a second set of footsteps echoing in the concrete. They were pacing him exactly 1 flight higher, stopping whenever he stopped. He pushed open the heavy door to the terrace and found nobody there. Seattle rain had completely soaked the rooftop, yet perfectly stamped across the puddles, a single line of bone-dry shoe prints led straight toward the edge of the building. Unnerved, Daniel turned back toward the stairwell. Standing right beside the heavy metal door was an older man in a dark business suit, completely motionless. Daniel lowered his camera for a fraction of a second, and the man was gone. That night, Daniel began reviewing his raw files. He didn't just find the man on the roof. He found him in the glass of the kitchen cabinets. In every empty room, he found him in the polished marble of the empty hallways. The man in the suit was already there, watching from the reflections. The final file in the folder was a perfectly focused photograph of Daniel's own back, taken from behind while he was setting up a shot. A week later, the real estate agent called to inform him that the property had been permanently pulled from the market, with zero explanation given. Constructing an impenetrable fortress in the sky successfully locks out the rest of the city. But if you aren't careful, that same security isolates you, trapping you hundreds of feet in the air with whatever was already waiting for you in the clouds.